up next month in December. 4 public meetings. You can join virtually via Zoom to learn more about the process and to provide comment. Or you can just go online to our papahanaumokuakea.gov website and provide comment there. That's through January 31st. So this is to provide additional protections for this place and these incredible deep sea habitats with diverse coral colonies and sponges, as well as the shallow waters. So please go check out that process, papahanaumokuakea.gov, and provide your comment. We'd love to hear from you through January 31st. What's that sponge to the right of the lasers there, Chris?
I don't know from this distance. If you want to zoom, you can ask them for
Zoomarumi?
I think he asked
yeah, please. Sorry, should have been clearer. There's the sponge you collected, Chris, to the lower right. Was that the same one?
I think it could have been a dead one there.
Oh, a dead
it's not
one.
quite the same. Oh
okay,
my goodness, it's another Poliopogon.
Poliopogon. This is like Poliopogon heaven.
What's with the two lumpy bits?
It's 2 sponges, one sponge on top of the other.
Wow.
They often settle out on each other.
That's very friendly of them.
Yeah, the smaller one on the left is a separate sponge. And quite frankly, I find this just rude. This is senior abuse.
Yes.
They're actually next to each other. They're just very close.
Oh yeah.
But what you can see is they don't actually touch. That's interesting. There is a slight gap between them.
Makes the current swirl. It's teamwork.
It might be. It creates their own little vortice realm of vortices.
Boy, when you're that close, you really got to get along with the other sponge.
Oh, you do. You do. Maybe they're married.
Yeah, it
Maybe
could be.
The sponges are...
Civil union.
Yes. So we probably only have about half an hour left on this.
I know, I'm desperate.
Clarification, about 15 minutes.
Ooh, even less.
I am
Boy.
desperately trying to see something that's
Gotta find it,
new
Chris.
and novel, and I'm afraid they're pretty much, we've seen all of these guys, and we've seen them before, and we've collected specimens of most of these too. Not very many specimens, but still, that's not, again, we're not, according to our permit, we're not collecting frivolously here.
Yeah, we do have a pretty stringent permit and collecting structure for Papahanaumokuakea to protect this place. Essentially, our first criteria we ask is, do you need to do the research within Papahanaumokuakea, and can it be done elsewhere? Of course, for this kind of exploratory research, the answer is definitively yes. We need to do it within the monument because we're trying to characterize these environments and to understand what's down here. And then we very much try to limit the number of collections to what's absolutely necessary, so no frivolous collections of more specimens than what are needed. This area is not only biologically significant, but it's also culturally significant. These organisms are considered part of the Hawaiian cosmos, really, connected ancestors, so to speak, to the Hawaiian people. So there are cultural protocols attached to collections as well as...
Sorry to interrupt.
Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
Quick interruption. So we were really creeping up on where we've been before. Chris, where would you like to go with your last 15 minutes?
How about if we stay a little bit down slope, so if you go a little bit more paralleling that, yeah, right there, that would be great.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, carry on. Thanks.
Yeah, so we do have a cultural working group who provided a wonderful name for this series of expeditions, as well as the cultural protocols for collections and for closing our dive. Hawaiian practices, it's very, very common. It's very pono or appropriate to ask for permission before you go into an area, and to also ask for the deities of that area to look out for you and protect you, and then to also ask permission if you're going to be collecting anything. The wonderful art of hula. Before often some of these larger hula competitions, there's a lot of collections that go on in the forest for the different beautiful dresses and other things that the performers wear. So they'll conduct a whole series of protocols before they go into the forest and collect these materials. So similarly, we have processes, protocols for our collections out here. I don't know, Kainalu, do you want to add anything to that? Kainalu's just waking up, poor guy.
Oh, kind of quiet here, but
he's actually been probably busier than any of us there, except for the pilots in the front row, certainly the back row.
You're giving us too much credit.
Okay, you haven't been very busy, kind of.
Oh yeah, I mean, that was a great explanation, though, Andy. I think just adding on to that, sort of to kind of compare it as in like introducing ourselves to a new space. So like when we go to somebody's house or yeah, anywhere new that we don't know, we don't just barge in. We, say hello and who we are, and yeah, just introduce ourselves. And so that's kind of what we try to do when we go to these types of spaces.
Yeah.
And you take off your slippers too, don't you?
Yeah, exactly.
Does Hercules have slippers?
What's that?
Does Hercules have slippers?
That still remains in our house in Washington. It's been living in Hawaii for 41 years. We cannot walk around the house. My wife has some household slippers.
Yeah.
But I'm barefoot in the house even if it's cold.
Yeah, it is cold up there.
Just can't break the habit. Just
All right. Move along.
So how long do you think it's going to take for Andrea to process do the dating on these rocks? Our geologist, one of our geologists on board this cruise is, I love her title of her presentation, I date rocks, as in
I love
little
story.
mixed metaphor there. But do you know how long the process takes for analyses of the rocks for age?
it takes a while. And it's not just the fact that the actual process takes a while for dating them. It's not a simple process. But also
it needs equipment that's on shore, right?
Oh,
it's
yeah.
not going to happen for weeks.
No, yeah, it won't happen for weeks. And then
months.
All of these rocks are going to go to the repository on the East Coast. And then once they're settled in there and they've been logged in and everything else, and then there'll be requests made to take the rocks or get pieces of them. And then after that, they've got to go through this whole analysis there, which will take quite some time. And then also you have to think that the people who are doing the analyses, some of them are active teachers, and they've got a whole lot of other stuff that they've got to do. So it always takes a while.
Yeah.
The same thing for the biology. It always takes a while because it's a long process. A lot of these sponges, if you're going to describe a new species, you actually have to go to a place that's got a scanning electron microscope, and you dissolve away all the tissue and you look at their microscopic parts, and then you have to very carefully measure, believe it or not, the individual rays coming off of these tiny little slivers of silica. And also you have to image them under a scanning electron microscope. You have to do an extensive literature search to make sure it really is a new species.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of work. It's not trivial, so it does not happen overnight.
Yeah, so we are trying to determine how old these
What's that?
seamounts are. and we're collected rock samples, the hard rocks, the hard angular rocks versus the soft squishy rocks, which have been the soft squishy ones are used for the microbial communities on them. So we've collected both kinds on this expedition. And
I can't hear you at all.
so then the harder rocks, harder angular rocks will be chemically analyzed for their age. I think maybe these seamounts are of Cretaceous origin, about 80 to 100 million years old. So hope to find that out. But what's interesting is that the rocks that we collected to look at the aggregation of the ferromanganese crust on these little rocks, Dr. Beth Orcutt's looking at that, and she was somewhat surprised at how thin the crusts were of the rocks that we collected. She thought that given the age of these seamounts, that the crust would be thicker than what she's been finding. And that may be the result of less of different processes going on in these seamounts, or less material to aggregate in this part of the Pacific Ocean. So we're going to find that out.
Can you zoom in on this puppy, please?
Time to come.
This little puppy?
Puppy. You really do want to adopt a sponge, don't you?
No, I'm not responsible enough. I would let it down.
Well, it takes a lot of care. I mean, you've got to provide the right type of rock and substrate, and you have to put it in a nice high pressure container, and you have to keep it in the darkness.
Your closet.
You got to have it almost in a freezer for the temperatures. And then you have to create a current so that you can feed it. So they take a lot of care. They're not a pet that you would adopt lightly.
All right, stick with the puppy, Trevor. Better off.
All right, come on, please. I'm happy enough with my dog.
That's a Poliopogon, oddly enough. Another one.
Mm-hmm. Oh, oddly
Crazy.
enough.
What are the odds?
Definitely seems to be the popular species down here.
You're seeing less dense community down here. It's a more cobbly substrate, which is never all that attractive to sponges and corals. And for the very reason Andy has mentioned already, if that's what you have to settle out on, then you can topple over once you get to a certain size. The current will just blow you over. There's a bunch of them on outcrop up ahead.
Yeah, any larger rock or something that looks like it's fully attached to the bottom has been taken advantage of. Every single one. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. And it's not as though I don't think they're sort of selecting that type of substrate when they're larvae or something like that. I just don't think the larvae that settle out on smaller rocks really make it that often. And the ones that do make it and are here for quite a long time, it's because they settle out on more consolidated substrate. That'd be my guess.
Behind here. Got distracted by the puppy.
A puppy sponge. So, Trevor, just out of curiosity, how would you house train a sponge? Now we are really going into the realm of early morning nonsense.
Oh, I missed it. What did you say?
I said, how would you house train a sponge?
I think that...
Here we go. Yes, I'm all ears. I've stunned him with that question.
I'm thinking about making sure that the concave side, the side that it squirts out of, has got to be aimed appropriately.
Okay, all right, that's a reasonable response. Nonsensical, but it's
involved a little bit of science.
Yeah,
yeah, it's just the right amount of science.
Oh, can you tell that we probably all need another cup of coffee, perhaps?
Or yes, another nap.
You know what's going to happen is like 30 seconds before we have to leave bottom.
Yep.
That great sponge or coral that we've been looking for will show up.
Of course.
But
We will
remember,
wave
you're the lead, so we don't have to leave bottom then.
We can
That's
stay down
true.
for another couple days if you want.
It'll jump right out.
That's true.
Scream at you.
I don't think we've seen enough of these sponges. I think we should stay down here for another 24 hours or so.
We have not seen enough of these sponges for me to properly learn their names, so if that tells you anything. Perioptagon?
Oh, nope.
No,
Polygon.
polygon.
Polyapagon.
Oh, who said that?
Polyapagon.
There you go. Polyapagon.
So, is one of the goals to determine the age of the sponges?
No.
Nope.
No.
Nope,
Okay.
that's not a
Wait,
goal.
let me say it
Viewer,
my typical sarcastic way. Nah.
Okay, our viewer who asked. We've had like 3 viewers asking about how to determine the age of the sponges.
Well, stop that, because I don't know.
Wow.
Come on, give me a question I know. Jeez.
Why don't we care about the age of the sponges?
Oh, we absolutely care.
Okay.
We just haven't figured out how to do it. It's not so easy.
Fair
And
enough.
how long have you been studying sponges, Chris?
Do I
No,
have
I'm
to?
just like,
Do I actually have to reveal how old I
That's a
am now?
great-
And you haven't figured it
Oh.
out yet?
Well, I haven't looked at that thing. I've been trying to figure out their taxonomy and what the heck I'm looking at all this time. And that's hard enough, just to identify the different types. I mean, as I mentioned before, they're incredibly complex because their morphology can be very plastic. So you can have the same species have all types of odd looks and odd, appearances because they're responding not only to the environment or the substrate they've attached to, but also the currents.
yeah.
So
So I'm understanding that sponges are one of the simplest organisms, yet their taxonomy is very complex.
yes, that's correct. And these glass sponges are typically deep water. As far as I remember, the shallowest glass sponge I've ever seen was about 350 meters deep. And some people wouldn't consider that shallow, but
we get a
we
zoom
do.
here, please? Just on some corals, I guess.
So we just don't get down here that often to really nail
Is it
it.
precious coral?
No.
Okay.
Wait, nah.
Nah.
Okay.
Okay, the
Okay.
precious
And what's this
coral
one
is
to the right?
pink, right?
So that one there is an overgrown coral again, and all of those huge polyps. And that's one way you can tell whether it's overgrown. This one is not. This is called Candidella gigantea.
Oh, that's the gigantea. Okay.
Yep, that's the gigantea.
And there's another one around here somewhere. Oop, there it is.
There's another one.
Yeah,
That's
there's-
hydroids?
yeah, that's hydrates growing on a bubblegum coral.
Bubblegum!
So
Oh,
the red
Zoom in,
is
please.
the bubblegum, and the yellow are the zoanthids overgrowing it. And you see a lot of these, and I don't know, it just doesn't. I think the zoanthids avoid the growing tips of the coral, so it can just keep going. It doesn't completely die.
Wow. That's ruthless. What's that?
It is very ruthless.
One or two. 1 or 2 Niskins left.
We're
yeah,
coming up on the ends, you guys. I just was thinking if you wanted a Niskin. or
yes,
anything.
please, we do.
Any particular place? Just any old where?
What do you think, Kainalu?
Oh, no, it's up to you, but Sarah mentioned if it could be within that range of 10 to 15 meter
Yep,
altitude.
absolutely.
Yeah.
But yeah, whatever you think, Chris.
So we'll do that right
you know
after we
what,
set up for
I-
recovery?
I think 10 or 15 meters.
Okay. I'm just
No, that's good. Thank
communicating
you for the
what
reminder.
Sarah.
Oh no, I know that's what they want to do. Thank you for remember that.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Okay, so Science Road, just so you know, we're finished our ship moves for the dive. We're going to let Argus settle out, all set up for recovery. And then we'll come up 10 meters off bottom, take a Niskin, and then that's probably the time we'll do our closing ceremony.
Okay,
Awesome.
sounds good. Well, we did actually accomplish the main objective of this dive, which is to determine whether or not this community extended further downslope from where we started the other day. And the answer is yes, it does. So it's spaced out. It's sort of on knolls in between nodule fields, but we got some pretty high density below that location where we started. So
Did we find a petering out place?
not so sure we did. And also I was trying to associate the community with a very specific type of substrate here, and that's wrong. I know that's wrong, and so we're still trying to figure out how to predict where these communities will develop. But every data point is valuable, and sometime someone is going to figure it out. Okay, have we got all of our blue water stories all squared away there, Andy?
Yeah, we're gonna, well, I'll figure it out.
All right, I'm going to start stretching out for recovery. You can bring your heading around, Antonella.
I've got one or two.
So what's our next dive after this one?
It's very close. It's going to be on another volcano, so we're finally leaving Dun Quixote behind with the windmills.
Oh, geez.
And we're going to go to another seamount that's slightly south of here. And I think it's going to be a fairly steep dive up a very steep ridge toward the summit of a volcano that never reached the surface, so not a guyot, smaller volcano.
Yeah. We're going to dive on the north side of that one as well, or?
South side.
South side. So kind of the opposite of this.
So one of our key objectives is to get rocks from as many of these volcanoes in this cluster as possible so they can really nail down the origin.
Mm-hmm.
Is it connected to the other chains that are south and north of us? And
Science, can you confirm that we're doing 1 or 2? Niskin 1 or 2 are the ones that are open?
Let's see. Yes, we have 1 or 2 open.
Okay. And just so you know, the altitude might be a little higher than 15 because the right side of the vehicle is downslope. So trying to keep the Niskins at that 10 to 15 meter altitude.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Yeah, so trying to determine if the southern Wentworth seamount train, which is where we are operating now, is connected to the northern part of that same chain, which is pretty likely, but the further determination is south of the Wentworth chain if it extends down into the Line Islands. And north
for red or yellow at the top.
North of the Wentworth chain,
yeah.
What was the other chain up there that it potentially could connect to going up to Hess Rise?
Well, that's the Wentworth chain, north of the Hawaiian Ridge.
Okay.
And then Andrea and others have this theory that this actually connects to a very well-known southern chain, and it's extremely long, this entire chain, and that's the Line Islands seamount chain.
So if that's the case, this will potentially be the longest chain of volcanoes generated from a hot spot.
Got it. Nice.
Nice.
Just the one, yep. Okay, Niskin taken.
Thank you. And that was sample number 95.
Sorry, 095?
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, goodbye, wonderful community.
You can keep it outboard for now.
Hoo-ho, till we see you again.
Yep.
So are we going to be doing this ceremony pretty soon?
Okay.
Yeah, so
We're going to set up for recovery, and then we'll do, right now I think it's a good time to do our closing release.
Okay, so to all of our viewers out there, at this time we will be going radio silent to conduct a private ceremonial protocol to acknowledge and honor the biocultural resources that are present and that we are interacting with and impacting. So we'll be back shortly.
So
Alrighty.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So now, viewing audience, is your time to submit all
Okay.
your questions so
Let's
we
come up.
can cover them in the
Burp, burp, burp.
our blue water ascent.
Better have some questions or you're just going to get bombarded by stories.
Yes, we might go off on the
deep end?
the deep end. Yes.
It's kind of nice just to sort of cruise past the ridge that as we ascend that we were just diving on. One last look.
Bolus Homeland,
Oh,
No, Poliopogon land.
Poliopogon land. Oh,
I
yes,
want to
you're
see
right.
a Bolosoma land.
Yeah, Bolus Homeland would be
Or,
cool.
Calificus.
Hmm.
Calificus land.
That would be neat.
I can just imagine myself looking up.
Uh-huh.
It's really tall.
Walking through the large stalked sponge field.
Uh-huh. White stalk, yellow stalk,
Mm.
or ET sponges. Well, we have
Again?
a viewer here who says,
Yep.
thank you all for your knowledge, dedication, and taking us along. Been watching for about 5 years and have learned so much.
Wow.
Well, thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for that comment. We appreciate it.
Bridge nav.
The water does look quite a bit more
Hi,
soupy.
so
than it
we
did.
are starting our ascent, anticipate about 2 hours and on surface close to 8 a.m. local. Thank you.
So we have a couple of questions here from the
Okay.
audience. I always believed white coral was dead. Is that not the case here, or is the color just not showing in the feed?
There are white corals, and they just don't have pigments on them. So you can have living white corals, but then you can also have dead white corals that the tissue is gone and it exposes a white branch in them as well. So the answer is that yes and no. It all depends upon the coral and what you're looking at. I like that top one right there. You want to read that top one?
Yeah. Will the Hawaiian Islands eventually become guyots?
And the answer to that is yes. Very astute question. Technically, it's a guillot because it's French and you
Guillot.
don't pronounce the T on there.
Okay.
But
thank you.
the sort of classic definition of a guillot is a flat top seamount where the top of it has to be 200 meters or deeper in order for that definition to apply. The Hawaiian Islands and all the banks that are up here are not that deep yet, most of them. There's a few, but not very many. So they're generally 60, 80 meters, you know, something like that. So they've got a little ways to go before the tops. The other complicating thing about the Hawaiian Islands is that there was such a large volume of lava that erupted in certain parts of the chain that you don't see a discrete base. The bases are all kind of connected. And a perfect example of this would be sort of Oahu, I think, in Maui, where if you look at in Molokai, for example, if you look at Oahu and Molokai and you look at that channel's only 700 meters or so deep. That's because the bases of those two islands are connected, over time. The abyssal seafloor around those islands is again 4,000 plus meters down, and these things are only about 700.
Is that channel the one people swim between?
They canoe between. I guess
swim.
Some people have swum it, right?
Kelly from our office swam that channel.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I don't know if I would do that.
Even
if I could, I don't know if I'd do that.
Kind of creepy.
It's creepy, and you can get some pretty fast currents going.
Oh,
creepy?
yeah. Creepy, yes.
To swim a channel?
Oh, yeah.
There are a lot of sharks out there.
They often do it at night, and there are, I mean, we haven't had anybody consumed by a shark, but one of those swimmers did get bitten by a cookie cutter shark.
Yeah.
That do the circular, kind of take a little circular chunk out of you.
And there's been some tracking of tiger sharks, and the tiger sharks, some of them at least, will go along Penguin Bank in that channel as well. So, I don't know, hats off to them. I'll watch them from home on my couch sponge.
You could get snuggled by a whale.
But if the bases are connected, going back to the question, if the bases are connected and the tops are flat, then is that really a geo? Does it, does the base, you know what I'm saying? There's a little different. Sometimes when they're all connected on the base, they call them a ridge, and that's why a lot of the Hawaiian atolls and the islands are considered the Hawaiian Ridge.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but the interesting thing about the Hawaiian Ridge and the Hawaiian Islands too is the volume of lava in these eruptions has changed over time.
Yeah.
So right now we're in a very high volume eruptive phase, and that's why the Big Island is so enormous. And when you go further north, a little bit further north where we are, there wasn't very high volume. So a lot of these seamounts and atolls were discrete. So the bases go all the way down.
Yeah. And we don't really know what the episodic, why it is episodic in the volume of flow. What causes that? What drives that? We still don't fully know.
And what creates these spectacular ridges that are I mean, now I don't mean to mix anything. All of the Hawaiian Islands and atolls are considered a ridge, but then if you look at Pioneer Bank, it also has a rift zone ridge that extends miles to the south. Why does that happen?
Right.
How does that even form?
Or Necker Ridge.
Necker Ridge. That's not Hawaiian. That's
an
older Cretaceous one. But, I don't know, there's a lot of questions, and these questions are arising more recently now because in part we've got this exceptional tool called multi-beam sonar. Before, if you think about it, we had a lot of seafloor features, but they look like those mounds that Aaron was showing us earlier. You can't really say much about them, But now that we're getting these exceptional images from the multi-beam sonar, now people can start asking questions, really good, specific questions.
Yeah, you also have other cool tools like Gravimetric Analysis, which looks at how big these features are underneath you and how much gravity they're actually not creating, but how much stronger the gravity is around these features. And so actually somebody on board, John Smith, came out with a paper a year and a half ago or so looking at Gardner pinnacles, Puahonu, and found that it is actually the largest feature on Earth, the largest mountain from the abyssal plain up to this tiny, tiny little basalt stack that still sticks barely above the surface. But the feature is so large that it's larger than Mauna Kea, it's larger than the Big Island, and it actually is the largest single feature on the planet, which is absolutely fascinating. And that just goes to show you how this volume is changing over time. Volume of output of the hotspot, the Hawaiian hotspot, and the mantle plume beneath it.
By the way, before I forget to do this, Lindsay G who's with the the Nautilus program. He says thanks for a great dive, and he also had a message for all the viewers out there. He wanted to let us all know that the OET, the Ocean Exploration Trust that operates the Nautilus, now has a test web map running in a portal under the ArcGIS tab. Excuse me. This shows the position and track of Nautilus and the vehicles in real time, and we added the waypoints of this dive. It annoyingly opens with the pop-up dialog of Nautilus, but select in the map and it will be removed. You can then zoom in and out to see the overview of the dive. This is a prototype map, and we're interested in feedback to add data and other capabilities that might be useful. The first goal was to have an overview for scientists ashore that they could interact with when the HYPACK screen is not available.
It's cool.
It is really cool. From someone who doesn't know anything about that, it is still really cool.
Well, how do you get to this portal? I'm
Well,
wondering.
it says it's under
Does anyone know here in the room?
Isn't it just in the science portal, like the main portal where you're logged in doing chat stuff?
Was it open to the public too?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Well, I think you probably have to sign in. I don't
Would
know.
it be expeditions or
Oh my
events?
gosh.
Or?
I don't know. I haven't signed in a long time. I've put data up for it, but I haven't looked at it.
Let's see. Oh, he's typing now, so maybe he's going to give an answer as to how we can find this thing. Yeah, I'll definitely take a look at it. This is not available publicly for now, but it's just in the SA portal.
So for those may not be overly familiar with this, so Nautilus, well, these, actually all three of the deep sea vessels, they have portals where scientists ashore can participate in real time with the expedition that's going on. And it's really wonderful because we have so much more expertise available to us on everything from geology to animal identification to pretty much anything. And so scientists in their particular field can get an account on this, and the scientist ashore portal, and they can provide us commentary in real time and say, hey, look at this, or I think this is this species, or I think this is what you're looking at. And that's what we were talking about this other component that they're adding onto it so that they can see in real time where the ship is and where the two vehicles, Hercules and Argus, are on the bottom, which just makes it nice and more visual.
So Lindsay is typing some more, so maybe we'll get a little more information on this new product.
I mean, it's absolutely incredible that what we're seeing, you can see in your living room. You know, there's a slight lag, 10 milliseconds if that. It depends on the internet latency and some other things, but it's pretty much in real time. And, you can provide questions and the scientists can provide input to what we're doing. It's a really, really neat tool, and we have people from all over the world that are participating in these expeditions. Certainly they don't get the kind of food that we get while we're out here, or or the opportunity to be at sea, but it's really wonderful to have that extra input on these dives.
Let's see, on Scientists Ashore dashboard, where you have the video tabs, there's another ArcGIS map tab. Okay, Scientists Ashore dashboard. Okay, try this. I got to check this out.
Yeah, I'm looking at it too. ArcGIS map.
Oh, there it is. You're right, there it is. So let's see, click on this tab.
And as we're discussing, they're always building new tools to enhance this science portal for the scientist ashore. And yeah, that is really cool. It shows a wonderful bathymetry map.
Mine's still loading, and you got yours. Oh, here we go, finally.
Yeah, where the vehicles are, where the ship is, so they can see on shore where we're along a ridge and what the slope is, and the orientation of the dive on the seamount or other feature.
This is really nice, Lindsay. Yeah, we're looking at it right now. I don't see anything really. Oh, I see. Hang on. So we'll click that. Yeah, it actually shows the ship track coming up here as well and lining up for the cruise. And then the whole dive track. This is wonderful. Thank you. What we're looking at is we're looking at a window that shows the multi-beam bathymetry map of our dive site here, but it also has the ROV track on it in real time, and it shows a little bit broader picture right now of where the vehicle is relative to the whole ridge. Sometimes HYPACK needs to be zoomed in for the pilots and the navigator to actually understand very precisely where the vehicles are relative to each other. But this gives us a bit of a view, an overview of where the vehicles are.
It's much more intuitive.
The larger topography.
Yeah. HYPACK is another tool that shows in much greater resolution the movement of the ROVs and the orientation of the ship to the ROVs and distance and things like that. But it's not as graphically interesting or visually interesting as this other tool, but way more accurate on HYPACK.
Wow.
This is more
Very
general.
nice. Very nice, Lindsay. I'm going to try that next dive, see how it goes. But I don't find anything annoying about this at all. I don't quite understand the problem you were talking about, but I'm certainly not seeing anything.
Yeah, so that portal's really kind of just been a work in progress the whole season that we've been trying to get it up and going. So it's kind of prototype testing and making sure we get it in our workflow to make sure to get, you know, the targets and maps and stuff there as well. So we're still getting it together, but been some great progress.
Absolutely. Very nice additional tool. We got any more questions from our viewers?
Yeah, when will the next dive be?
The next dive is going to be on a smaller volcano south of this geode. It's not going to take us long to get there. So as soon as we finish the dive here, I'm going to run upstairs and finish the dive plans. We run downstairs, I guess. We're kind of at the top of the ship. Run downstairs some of my room and finish the next dive plan and get that submitted around the ship. And then Emil will, once he's looked it over and made sure it's all correct, and also the mapping team check all the positions and make sure I haven't screwed up somewhere, which I have already on the screws. Then they'll get them out and about to everybody. So it won't be long before our next dive. We don't have to do this really long transit that we did for the last couple of days. The weather is beautiful. We're back to very glassy water up here, very calm. And so it'll be a very short transit, a little bit of maintenance on the vehicles, and then down they go again.
By 12?
It's quite possible. Let's see, it's 6:08, so we have 6 hours, 2 more hours to the surface, 4 hours. Yeah, I think we could probably deploy by 12, but this is kind of Emil's and the captain's decision. So we'll talk it over with them.
Chris, can you give me a rough idea which seamount? Is it southwest?
It is, I can give you should have this. Excuse me. Actually bring up Google Earth.
Yeah, I was trying to get ARC just because it's the one that starts with an E, right? Euphemia?
Euphemia.
Euphemia.
Or Euphemia, I think there's an EU in there. I believe that's correct. I just want to double check. know what, I'm going to take a break and I'm going to look. I'm going to go down to my room to make sure, and I will tell you, and I'll also measure it out.
Yeah, just a rough coordinate so I could start kind of getting us in order for however we have to get there.
Absolutely. I'll be right back.
Okay.
So Trevor, let's do our math problem.
Do the what problem?
The math.
Math problem.
How deep are we, and how long is it going to take us to come up to the surface?
We're at 1,530 meters. That's 1530 meters. And we come up at 15 meters a minute. How many minutes?
Thank you.
You want to throw an extra wrench in that. We stop at 50 meters. We don't stop at the surface. That's when we hand over to the deck. There's an extra wrinkle.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then how much time do we budget for messing around on the surface? I think like 15 minutes.
Yeah, 15, 20 kind of thing.
Just get it all sorted out.
I mean, the question is how long it takes to get from 50 meters depth to breakfast.
Most importantly.
About 20, 25 minutes.
Especially when we had an early dinner yesterday, right?
It was early, but it sure was filling.
I think I've eaten enough Cheez-Its that I don't need breakfast.
Oh.
Nothing like getting up at 3:30 and eating your weight in Cheez-Its.
Wow.
Nothing quite like it.
Or whole grain.
So I guess
half whole grain. I
Half
think.
whole grain.
They're half whole grain. Isn't that right? Didn't you figure that out, that they're only half whole grain?
I actually hadn't even looked. I was
It's
just
probably
eating
smarter.
them.
Probably better to
I
not
didn't
look.
want to know.
You're all in, no matter what.
Well, I was like, I just need something salty when I woke up this morning because I ate so much pie and cake yesterday, and I was like, I just need salt.
Which one? Roger.
so. While Chris comes back,
Perfect,
maybe we
yeah.
can answer this question from a viewer. What did the crew do for Thanksgiving? Or after Thanksgiving? Or after dinner?
We dove after Thanksgiving dinner. we
we
put the ROVs
we did a little
in
bit
the
of
water.
this, but in the opposite direction. We had a really great dinner that the crew put together for us, which was delicious and amazing. And then I think most of us, or some of us, took a little nap.
Yep.
And then we put vehicles in the water, same as it ever was.
Yeah. This is a very productive sponge community up on Nautilus.
Filter feeding our Thanksgiving dinner.
Yeah, it was just so beautiful yesterday. I ended up on the monkey deck and took a nap there. Really nice.
Yeah, it was nice and calm when we, between, getting on site and Just we had a few, maybe I think we had an hour where we were just on DP. It was nice and quiet. It was lovely. I took a rescue boat nap. They're my favorite naps.
Rescue boat nap.
Yeah,
Hammock style.
So nice up there.
Nice.
When it's in the shade, I can't handle like any
The
sun.
direct sun would be brutal. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I would melt.
I was going to say, I thought it was in the direct sun. I was like,
Yeah,
I'm
what
so
shade?
impressed.
Yesterday, between dinner and the dive, before we started watch, it was pure shade. It was like magical.
From the golf ball?
From what?
The big satellite?
Oh, no, I think it was the control van even. Like, it was just where the sun was. It completely blocked it. I was
Nice.
so great. So nice.
Well, since we've got a lot of blue water time to cover, it might be good to discuss a little bit about this area that we're in and some of the protections that have gone in place and kind of human history in the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands. So the earliest human presence in this area was the early Hawaiians, who voyaged up to at least the first two islands several hundred thousand for 1,000 years, and visited Nihoa and Mokumanamana, the first two islands in the northwestern Hawaiian island chain. And we know that they lived on Nihoa for at least 700 years and established house foundations, ceremonial sites. There are other burial caves on the island. And the next island up, Mokumanamana, is just covered in ceremonial sites, heiau, as we call them in Hawaiian language. And they're platforms on the island that cover the entire, it's a pretty steep island, but there are over 60 ceremonial sites, or heiau, on that island. And it was a very important place for many of the chiefs of the Hawaiian Islands to go to consolidate their ritual power. That's what's thought of what that island was used for, and they would potentially build these ceremonial platforms and aggregate their strength and come back with more power to rule in their given area that they came from the main Hawaiian Islands. And so then beyond that, the Hawaiians may have voyaged further up the chain. There are some references to the other islands in chant and mele stories and song, but we don't know for sure because a lot of the other islands don't have like hard, they don't have permanent structures on them. And then the first Western protections, well, before that, even the whaling ships came through the northwestern Hawaiian Islands. They weren't hunting whales in the northwestern Hawaiian Islands as much as traversing the area. And several of them didn't make it. They ran aground on some of these islands. So the Western name for these islands, several of them, like Pearl and Hermes, are named after whaling vessels that ran aground on these islands. And then we had the first protections were put in place by Theodore Roosevelt, because on Midway, they were slaughtering the albatross on that island for their feathers, for the millinery trade. Back in the early 1900s, they had these fancy headdresses with these incredible feathers in them, and they were very popular fashion item. And so they were collecting feathers for creating those hats and other things. They were also using the eggs for the albumin, which was used in large photographic plates back in the early 1900s. And so this is the earliest, one of the earliest, sorry, what?
Sorry. Nope, sorry, you're good.
Okay. One of the earliest acts of the fledgling National Audubon Society was to draw attention to this slaughter of seabirds out on these far, far away islands. They brought it to the attention of Theodore Roosevelt, who, as many know, was an ardent conservationist. And he sent the Marines out there to chase mostly Japanese poachers off of these islands and to protect them. And so in 1909, the first formal Western protection for this place was the Hawaiian Islands Bird Reservation that surrounded all of these islands except for Kure, because Kure Atoll was part of the state of Hawaii and not federal land, as Midway was. The other islands are part of the Hawaiian archipelago as well, but Kure was excluded from that Hawaiian Islands Bird Reservation. And so that protected the seabirds. That's the first act in understanding this place, and drew it to public attention that these islands did exist and were part of the state of Hawaii. And so there were different evolutions of that through the 1900s that changed from the Hawaiian Island Bird Reservation to 2 national wildlife refuges under the Department of Interior. So there was Hawaiian Islands National Wildlife Refuge, which covers all the islands except for Midway and Kure, and then ultimately Midway Atoll National Wildlife Refuge and Battle of Midway Memorial. During World War II, there was quite a bit of military action in the northwestern Hawaiian Islands, particularly Midway, which saw certainly action, and the Battle of Midway happened just northwest of Midway Atoll. And after the war and after military presence there, they turned it over to Fish and Wildlife Service to manage as a national wildlife refuge. So we've had all this protection through the 1900s for a lot of the terrestrial areas and some of the shallow water areas, but the first kind of large-scale marine protection was to put in. There was concern about the Hawaiian monk seals, which were a critically endangered species. The only monk seals are really the only warm water seal species. And there are 3 different types of monk seals in the world. One is extinct in the Caribbean. There's a Mediterranean monk seal, and there's a Hawaiian monk seal. And so the first protections and the large protections in the marine area were put in to exclude fishing around the islands to protect the monk seals. And that was kind of a fishery exclusion zone for the longline fishery. And then later, in the late 1999 or so, there was a lot of attention to corals because coral reefs were dying in several areas of the U.S., and particularly in the Florida Keys, where we had a big die-off of corals. So a lot of attention came to how do we protect these corals? And where are they? We really didn't know where all the different coral reefs were in the United States. And so in 1999, they established the Coral Reef Conservation Program, and they started to look at where the corals were. And lo and behold, some of the largest and most extensive coral reefs in the United States were in the northwestern Hawaiian Islands, which was still relatively unknown to most people. And President Clinton decided to act to protect these coral reefs and created the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands Coral Reef Ecosystem Reserve, which was the first really large-scale marine protected area in the world since the Great Barrier Reef was protected in '76. So it's the first kind of large-scale protection that we've had in over 20 years. And then that slowly evolved over the course of early 2000s to a Marine National Monument in 2006 under President Bush, which made stronger protections, excluded fishing, any commercial activity in the area, and then ultimately expanded it even further under President Obama to be the expanded area, the Papahanaumokuakea Marine National Monument, at 580,000 square miles, which is a vast area, the largest fully protected conservation area on the planet. And in the interim, we also became a World Heritage Site for natural and cultural features, as well as a particularly sensitive sea area, which basically instructs mariners to be careful in this area and to provide notification when they're entering and leaving the area and what they're carrying, so that if anything comes up, if anything issue happens, we can know.